Most first-time voters understand president's roles, less clear on relationship with government. Singapore, most first-time voters understand the roles and functions of Singapore's elected president, but are less clear about the head of state's relationship with the government, parliament, and the cabinet, a survey by 24newsread.blogspot.com and Today found. The face-to-face survey conducted with 1,500 Singapore citizens aged 21 to 33, all of whom are eligible to vote in a presidential election this year for the first time, if the polls are held, also found that respondents were less clear about whether the president has the power to change existing laws and the elected president's relationship with political parties. Singapore could see its next presidential election in the coming month or so, with former Deputy Prime Minister and Senior Minister Tharman Shanmugaratnam, former GIC Chief Investment Officer Ng Kok Song and founder of Harvey Norman Asha George Goh having thrown their hats into the ring so far. The Presidential Elections Committee will assess the eligibility of each candidate to stand for election. The last contested presidential vote was in 2011. President Halimah Yacob assumed the role in 2017, after an uncontested election that was reserved for candidates from the Malay community. Her term expires on September 13 this year. President's roles and functions. The 24newsread.blogspot.com Singapore Presidential Election Survey was conducted between May 18 and June 23. It found that first-time voters were generally familiar with the functions and roles of the elected president. A total of 88.4% of respondents knew that one of the roles of the elected president is to safeguard Singapore's national reserves. The majority, or 84.5%, also knew that the government can only spend past reserves with the approval of the elected president. During the COVID-19 pandemic, between 2020 and 2022, Madam Halimah approved on 3 separate occasions the government's access to a cumulative total of $52 billion, $39 billion of past reserves to help protect lives and livelihoods from the impact of the pandemic. In the end, the expected draw on past reserves from FY 2020 to FY 2022 was $40 billion, lower than the initial amount that the government had sought the president's approval for. Most respondents were also aware of what the elected president can do with regard to certain laws. About 81.4% of respondents knew that the president can veto or disagree with the government's proposals on restraining orders under the Maintenance of Religious Harmony Act, if the advice of the cabinet is contrary to the recommendations of the Presidential Council for Religious Harmony. Similarly, 79.9% knew that the president can veto the government's proposals on continued detention under the Internal Security Act, and 64.3% knew the president can do the same if the government refuses to allow an investigation by the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau. The president's powers. The vast majority, 83.9%, of respondents knew that the elected president has custodial powers, not executive powers, which means they can veto or block government actions in specified areas, but they have no role to advance their own policy agenda. Results also showed that most first-time voters knew that the elected president must consult the Council of Presidential Advisors when exercising their veto powers in connection with Singapore's reserves or the appointment of key office holders. More than half of the respondents, or 57.7%, were aware that the elected president does not have the power to change existing laws. But 42.3% were not. Political affiliation. The issue of an elected president's ties with political parties has been a divisive topic among the 3 presidential hopefuls since they announced their intention to run. Mr. Tharman was a People's Action Party, PAP, Member of Parliament from 2001 before resigning from the ruling party and leaving politics on July 7. When questioned about his independence at the official launch of his presidential bid on July 26, Mr. Tharman cited the example of former President Ong Teng Cheong, who was a cabinet minister and even chairman of the PAP for many years before he became Singapore's head of state. He emphasized his independence of mind, highlighting the difference between that and independence from any past affiliation with a political party. In response to questions about Mr. Tharman's stand, Fellow presidential hopeful Mr. Goh said a day later that it is difficult for someone to become independent overnight after having been in Singapore's political system for decades. Mr. Goh is best known as the founder of Harvey Norman Asia, which distributes consumer electronics and furniture in Asia under the Australian brand. Mr. Ng, another presidential hopeful and the former chief investment officer of Singapore's sovereign wealth fund GIC, has also spoken about his lack of political affiliations. He said Singapore needs a president who is independent of any political party to safeguard the integrity of our institutions. From the survey questions on the president's links with political parties, 65.4% of respondents knew that the elected individual must not be a member of any political party. About 56.3% of respondents knew that a political party can endorse the elected president, while a higher 66.4% knew that the elected president cannot endorse a political party. Relationship with Cabinet and Parliament. The 24newsread.blogspot.com survey also polled first-time voters about the relationships between the elected president, the cabinet, and parliament. In contrast to the questions on the roles and functions of the elected president, where there was a generally high level of awareness, fewer respondents were able to answer most of the questions on the relationships correctly. About 66.5% of respondents knew that the elected president generally takes instructions from the cabinet, the survey found. But a similar proportion, 63.9%, did not know that the elected president does not take instructions from Parliament. More than half, or 57.7%, knew that the cabinet does not take instructions from the elected president, and 51.3% knew that Parliament does not take instructions from the elected president.
Subscribe our YouTube channel and click our bell icon for new videos.